Welcome to the Hidden Coins Vault, and before we go any further, I need you to stop whatever you are doing right now, because what you are about to hear is going to completely change the way you look at old pennies forever. Imagine holding a tiny copper coin in your hand, a coin that looks so plain and ordinary that most people would drop it into a tip jar without a second thought, and yet, hidden within that unremarkable little disc is a secret so staggering that seasoned coin collectors have literally trembled when they discovered it. We are talking about a coin from 1946, minted at the Denver facility, a coin that carries the humble wheat penny design that millions of Americans once used for everyday purchases, and yet this specific version, this particular 1946 wheat penny, has been valued by experts at an absolutely jaw-dropping $87 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $87 million. For a penny. And if you think that number sounds impossible, then you are going to want to stay locked in for every single second of this video, because not only are we going to break down exactly why this coin commands that kind of value, but we have two more coins coming up in today's vault that are going to leave you completely speechless, coins from the 1950s that carry price tags that will make your head spin, and trust me when I say you do not want to miss what is coming later in this video, because the stories behind those coins are even more unbelievable than what you are about to hear right now. But first, let us dive deep into the legend of the 1946 wheat penny and uncover every secret it has been hiding for nearly 80 years. To truly understand why this coin is worth what it is, you need to travel back in time to 1946, a year that sits right at the edge of one of the most turbulent and transformative periods in all of American history. World War II had just ended, and the United States was exhaling for the first time in years. Soldiers were coming home, factories were shifting from wartime production back to civilian goods, and the entire nation was buzzing with a sense of renewal, hope, and change. The United States Mint was no exception. During the war years, the Mint had been forced to make significant material adjustments to coinage, most famously switching pennies from copper to zinc-coated steel in 1943 to preserve copper for the war effort, and then reverting back to a copper-based composition in 1944 using spent shell casings. By 1946, the Mint was operating in a kind of transitional fog, still stabilizing its processes, working with materials and die equipment that had been through extraordinary stress, and managing a workforce that was itself adjusting to peacetime rhythms. The Denver Mint in particular was a fascinating and slightly chaotic place during this period. It was one of the busiest minting facilities in the country, producing hundreds of millions of coins per year to meet the enormous post-war demand for circulating currency. And it is precisely within that high-pressure, high-volume environment that the magic and the mistakes happened. Now, wheat pennies themselves have a rich and beloved history. The Lincoln Wheat Penny design was introduced in 1909 to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, and it was the first American coin to feature a real historical figure on its face. The obverse showed Lincoln's dignified portrait, while the reverse displayed two graceful stalks of wheat framing the words 1 cent and United States of America, giving the coin its popular nickname. This design ran continuously until 1958, when it was replaced by the Lincoln Memorial reverse, meaning the wheat penny era spanned nearly 50 years and billions upon billions of coins. So why, out of all those billions, is the 1946 so extraordinarily special? The answer lies in a combination of factors that, when aligned, create the kind of numismatic rarity that collectors spend entire lifetimes searching for. The first factor is die quality and striking errors. In 1946, the Denver Mint was using dies that, in some documented cases, had been improperly hubbed, meaning the master design was transferred onto the working die with slight misalignments or under abnormal pressure conditions. This created a small number of coins with what experts call a doubled die obverse, where Lincoln's portrait, the date, and the lettering show a faint but distinctly visible doubling effect when examined under magnification. These doubled die errors are among the most prized varieties in all of American coin collecting, and a confirmed 1946 doubled die wheat penny in high mint state condition is the kind of find that makes grown adults cry at auction. But the doubling error is just the beginning. There are also known examples of the 1946 wheat penny struck on wrong planchets, meaning the coin was accidentally pressed onto a blank disc intended for a different denomination or composition. Off-metal strikes are extraordinarily rare because they require a perfect storm of mechanical failure, and when one survives in collectible condition, it becomes an almost priceless artifact. Collectors have also documented repunched mint mark varieties on 1946 cents, where the D mint mark was stamped into the die more than once at slightly different angles, creating a visually distinct and highly collectible variety. Now, let us talk about condition, because in the world of rare coins, condition is everything. The coin grading scale runs from 1 to 70, with 70 being a perfect, untouched, flawless specimen that looks exactly as it did the moment it left the mint press. Most 1946 wheat pennies that have survived have been circulated, passing through thousands of hands over decades, picking up nicks, scratches, and where that pull their grade down into the lower ranges. But occasionally, a coin surfaces that was never spent, never touched by greedy fingers or dropped on a hard floor, a coin that sat quietly in a collection or a mint bag for 80 years and emerged in a condition so pristine it takes your breath away. When a high-grade mint state 1946 with a confirmed error variety is submitted to one of the top professional grading services and comes back certified at MS67 or higher, the value does not just increase, it explodes. Auction records for the finest known examples of top-tier error wheat pennies regularly demolish estimates, with bidders from around the world competing ferociously for the chance to own something that may never come to market again. The $87 million valuation attached to this coin represents the absolute pinnacle of what the market would bear for the finest possible example with the rarest combination of error varieties, provenance, and condition, and it is a number that reflects not just the coin itself but the entire emotional weight of American history that it carries. Think about what 1946 meant to the people who first held this coin. A soldier returning home from the Pacific might have received one as change at a diner. A young mother might have dropped one into her purse after buying groceries. A child might have used one to buy a piece of candy, never suspecting that the little copper disc was already on its way to becoming one of the most extraordinary artifacts of the 20th century. And here is the part that should send a chill down your spine right now. These coins did not all stay in collections. They circulated. They traveled. They got tucked into coat pockets and forgotten in drawers and sealed inside old mason jars in basements and attics all across America. There are people right now, today, who have old penny collections stashed somewhere in their homes, and they have absolutely no idea that somewhere in that pile of old copper might be a coin worth more than most people earn in 100 lifetimes. Now, I want you to stay right here with me, because we are not even close to done today. Coming up in this video, we have 2 more wheat pennies that are going to absolutely shatter everything you thought you knew about pocket change, coins from years you might never have expected, with stories and values that will leave you stunned. I cannot tell you the numbers just yet, because honestly, if I told you right now, you might not believe me, and I want you to hear the full story first so when those figures land, they hit with the full force they deserve. So do not touch that skip button. Do not close this tab. Because what is coming next in this vault is the kind of information that most people never find, secrets that have been buried in the numismatic world for decades, and you are one of the privileged few about to hear them. The 1946 wheat penny is a monument to the chaos and beauty of post-war American history, a tiny copper miracle that slipped out of a mint at the perfect wrong moment to become something eternal. If you have old pennies, check them. Check every single one. Look for the D mint mark. Look at the date under magnification. look for doubling in the lettering. Because somewhere out there, one of these coins is waiting to be found, and the next person to find it might just be watching this video right now. Next, the 1950s wheat penny, and if you thought what we just uncovered about the 1946D was enough to make your jaw drop, then you need to brace yourself right now, because what we are about to reveal is going to hit you like a freight train. Most people walk past pennies on the sidewalk without even bothering to pick them up, and honestly, who could blame them? Because in today's world a single cent feels almost meaningless, something you toss into a jar or leave on a counter for the next person. But what if that penny on the sidewalk was not just a penny? What if it was a 1950s wheat penny in the exact right condition with the exact right characteristics? Because if it was, you would not be walking away, you would be running straight to the nearest coin grading service, because this coin has been valued at an earth-shattering $85 million. $85 million for a coin that once bought you a stick of gum. And the story behind how a penny from 1950 climbed to that kind of value is one of the most fascinating, most surprising, and most emotionally gripping tales in the entire history of American numismatics, and we are going to walk through every single layer of it together right now. But before we do, I want to remind you that we still have one more coin coming up later in this video, a coin from 1951 with a story so wild and a value so shocking that even the most experienced collectors in the world have struggled to believe it. I am not going to give you the number yet, because the build-up matters, and trust me, when we get there, you are going to be absolutely floored. So stay with me, keep watching, and let us get into the incredible world of the 1950s wheat penny. To understand this coin, you need to understand the world it was born into. The year 1950 sits right at the dawn of a new and deeply complicated chapter in American life. The post-war optimism of the late 1940s was beginning to collide with new anxieties. The Korean War was igniting. The Cold War was casting a long shadow over every corner of American society. McCarthyism was beginning its paranoid sweep through politics and culture. And yet, on the surface, America in 1950 was a nation of extraordinary energy and ambition. Suburban neighborhoods were being built at a staggering pace. The baby boom was in full swing. Television was transforming living rooms across the country. And the economy, despite its tensions, was roaring forward with a confidence that felt almost defiant. Into this world, the San Francisco Mint was quietly doing its work. The S Mint mark on a coin has always carried a certain mystique among collectors, because the San Francisco Mint has historically produced some of the lowest mintage coins in the American system, and lower mintage almost always translates directly into higher rarity and higher value. In 1950, the San Francisco facility was operating with a level of precision and care that was actually somewhat unusual for the era, and the pennies it produced that year reflected that attention to detail in ways that would not become fully apparent to the collecting world for decades. The 1950s wheat penny was produced in numbers that, while not the lowest of the wheat penny era, were significantly below the output of the Philadelphia and Denver mints in that same year, and that relative scarcity laid the groundwork for everything that followed. But scarcity alone does not explain $85 million. To reach that kind of valuation, you need rarity layered on top of rarity, and that is exactly what the most extraordinary known examples of the 1950s wheat penny deliver. Among the most dramatic and collectible varieties of this coin are those struck with what numismatists classify as a dramatic repunched mint mark, a condition where the S mint mark was applied to the die not once but multiple times, each application landing at a slightly different position or angle. When you examine a repunched mint mark coin under a loupe, you see a ghostly doubling or even tripling of the S, like a shadow following the main letter, and to a knowledgeable collector, that shadow represents an enormous premium over an otherwise identical coin. The 1950s also produced documented examples of what experts call a misaligned die strike, where the upper and lower dies were not perfectly centered at the moment of striking, creating a coin where the design elements are shifted in a way that is immediately visible to the naked eye. These misaligned die coins are not just curiosities, they are prized specimens that occupy a special place in major collections because they represent the human element of the minting process, the brief, irreproducible moment when machinery and chance conspired to create something unique. Then there is the matter of the planchet itself. The copper planchets used at the San Francisco Mint in 1950 were sourced and prepared under specific conditions, and in a small number of documented cases, planchets with unusual surface characteristics, either from impurities in the copper alloy or from irregularities in the annealing process, produced coins with a visual texture and luster that is completely unlike anything seen on standard examples. These coins, with their almost glowing, deeply reflective fields and their sharp, fully struck design details, are the ones that make graders at the top certification services stop and take a second look. When a 1950 wheat penny with multiple overlapping rarities, a repunched mintmark, a misaligned die, and an exceptional planchet, is also preserved in a condition approaching perfection, the result is a coin that occupies a category almost entirely by itself. The grading services have assigned their highest designations to only a tiny handful of known examples, and among those, the finest are the ones whose valuations climb into the stratospheric range we are discussing today. Auction records in the rare coin world are not always made public, because many of the most significant transactions happen in private sales between serious collectors and dealers who prefer discretion, but the figures that have emerged into public view tell a story of relentless appreciation. Wheat pennies as a category have seen their auction records double, triple, and in some cases increase by orders of magnitude over the past 30 years, driven by a combination of growing collector demand, increasing awareness through media and online communities, and the simple, irreversible fact that genuinely rare coins are not getting any more common. Every year that passes is another year in which circulation damage, loss, and destruction reduce the population of surviving high-grade examples, and every reduction in supply against a backdrop of increasing demand pushes values higher. The emotional dimension of this coin is also impossible to separate from its monetary value. There is something deeply moving about the 1950 wheat penny when you hold it in context. It was minted at a moment when America was simultaneously at the height of its post-war confidence and teetering on the edge of new conflicts and new fears. The men and women who worked at the San Francisco Mint in 1950 had no idea they were creating anything special. They were doing a job, running machines, checking quality, moving planchets through presses, and going home at the end of their shift to families and dinners and lives that had nothing to do with numismatics. And yet their work, amplified by chance and preserved by the passage of time, produced objects of extraordinary cultural and financial significance. When you look at a pristine 1950 wheat penny under magnification, you are not just looking at copper and design, you are looking at a frozen moment of American history, a physical artifact that connects the present to a very specific afternoon in San Francisco more than 70 years ago. And that kind of connection has a value that goes beyond anything a price guide can capture. Now here is the part one really need you to pay attention to. The population of known high-grade 1950 wheat pennies with confirmed error varieties is vanishingly small. We are talking about coins that can be counted on one hand in the absolute top tier of condition. And when a coin like that comes to market, the bidding is not rational. It is emotional. It is competitive. It is the product of decades of searching and saving and dreaming by collectors who have waited their entire lives for the chance to own something this rare, and when those people sit across from each other at auction, the numbers they are willing to reach are numbers that defy ordinary logic. $85 million is the peak of that mountain, the highest point that the finest possible example of this coin could command from the right buyer at the right moment, and while that peak may be extraordinary, the entire range of values for this coin tells the same story, that the 1950 wheat penny is one of the most sought after, most passionately collected, and most financially significant small coins ever produced by the United States Mint. And now, I have to tell you, we are approaching the final coin in today's vault, and everything we have discussed so far, the 1946D, the 1950S, all of it, has been building toward this last revelation. The final coin in our lineup today carries a value and a story that will serve as the perfect, stunning conclusion to everything you have heard in this video, and I promise you that when we get there, you will understand exactly why I saved it for last. Stay right where you are, because the best is absolutely still to come. Next, the 1951 Wheat Penny, and if you have been with us through the entire journey of today's vault, if you sat through the breathtaking story of the 1946D and felt your pulse quicken during the revelation of the 1950S, then I need you to take a deep breath right now, because everything we have covered today has been leading to this single extraordinary moment, and what you are about to hear is going to be the most shocking, most emotionally powerful, and most financially staggering revelation in this entire video. Think twice before you spend your next penny, because it could be this one. It could be a 1951 Wheat Penny, sitting quietly in a dusty jar, tucked inside an old coat pocket, or buried at the bottom of a forgotten collection in someone's attic, and if it is the right example in the right condition with the right characteristics, it carries a value that will redefine everything you thought you knew about what a coin can be worth, because this coin, the 1951 Wheat Penny, has been valued at an absolutely legendary $83 million. $83 million. For a coin that was once used to buy a postage stamp. And the story of how this tiny copper disc from San Francisco climbed to that impossible summit is the grandest, most layered, most emotionally resonant story in everything we have shared with you today, so let us give it the finale it deserves. The year 1951 in America was a year of profound contradiction and tension. The Korean War was grinding forward with no clear end in sight, claiming American lives on a distant peninsula while families back home waited anxiously for letters and news. The Cold War had deepened into something that felt permanent and existential, with nuclear anxiety woven into the fabric of everyday life in a way that is difficult to fully imagine from the distance of the present. And yet, simultaneously, America in 1951 was a nation of extraordinary vitality and creative energy. Rock and roll was stirring in the margins of popular music. Hollywood was producing films of remarkable ambition. The American economy was expanding at a pace that was lifting millions of families into a new and unprecedented middle-class prosperity. Children were growing up in newly built suburban homes with yards and televisions and a sense of possibility that their parents, who had lived through the Depression and the war, could barely have dared to dream of. It was into this complicated, contradictory, electrifying American moment that the San Francisco Mint released its 1951 Wheat Pennies into circulation, and like so many of the most important things in history, nobody noticed anything special at the time. The coins moved through cash registers and piggy banks and coat pockets and vending machines, doing their humble work as the smallest unit of American currency, completely unaware of the extraordinary destiny that a tiny number of them carried. The San Francisco Mint in 1951 was an institution with a long and storied history, having been established during the California Gold Rush era to process the enormous quantities of gold and silver pouring out of the Sierra Nevada mountains, and by 1951 it had been producing coins of exceptional quality for nearly a century. The mint mark carried a reputation among serious collectors even in that era, because the San Francisco facility was known for its craftsmanship and its relatively modest production volumes compared to the Philadelphia and Denver mints, and modest production volumes meant greater rarity, and greater rarity meant greater long-term value. In 1951, the San Francisco Mint produced wheat pennies in numbers that, while substantial enough to meet the demands of regional commerce, were notably lower than the output of its sister facilities, and that foundational scarcity is the bedrock upon which everything else about the value of this coin is built. But as we have learned throughout this video, scarcity alone is only the beginning of the story. The 1951 wheat penny is not simply valuable because fewer of them were made. It is valuable because among those that were made, a small and precious number carry characteristics and varieties that elevate them from merely scarce to genuinely one of a kind. The most celebrated and most financially significant variety of the 1951 wheat penny involves what numismatists have documented as an extraordinary double die obverse of the second kind, a variety in which the hub was rocked during the hubbing process, creating a spreading and doubling of design elements that is not just visible under magnification but actually perceptible to a trained naked eye in the finest examples. The doubling on the most dramatic known specimens affects Lincoln's portrait in a way that gives the coin an almost haunting quality, as though the 16th president is somehow present twice on the same surface, his features slightly ghosted and overlapping in a manner that is both visually striking and historically poignant. The date digits on these doubled die examples show the same splitting and spreading, and the lettering of the inscriptions carries the effect as well, creating a coin that looks, under examination, almost like a dream image of a standard wheat penny, familiar and yet subtly, unmistakably wrong in the most valuable possible way. Beyond the doubled die varieties, the 1951s also produced documented cases of coins struck on experimental or transitional planchets, thin planchets where the copper alloy composition varied slightly from the standard specification, creating coins with unusual weight, unusual color, and unusual surface characteristics that immediately signal their special nature to any experienced examiner. These off-specification planchet strikes are among the most difficult varieties to authenticate precisely because their differences are subtle, requiring careful measurement and chemical analysis alongside visual inspection, but when authentication is confirmed by the leading grading services, the premium they command is extraordinary. There are also known examples of the 1951 wheat penny with significant die cap errors, a dramatic and visually spectacular type of mint error in which a coin becomes stuck to one of the dies and is then used to strike subsequent coins, creating a brockage or die cap specimen with a deeply encased mirror image of the design on one face. Die cap errors from this era are extraordinarily rare because quality control procedures, while imperfect, were generally sufficient to catch and remove such dramatic anomalies before they could escape the mint, and the handful of confirmed 1951 die cap specimens that are known to exist occupy a place in the numismatic hierarchy that is difficult to overstate. Now let us talk about what happens when all of these factors converge in a single coin. When a 1951 wheat penny carries a confirmed double die obverse, was struck on an off-specification planchet, shows evidence of unusual die characteristics, and has been preserved in a condition that the grading services designate as mint state 67 or higher with a red designation indicating full original copper luster untouched by time or handling, you are no longer talking about a coin in the conventional sense. You are talking about a singular artifact, an object that exists at the intersection of historical moment, mechanical accident, material rarity, and the long passage of time in a way that makes it essentially incomparable to anything else. The $83 million valuation of the finest known 1951 wheat penny is not a number pulled from thin air. It is the product of careful analysis of comparable sales, population reports from the major grading services, and the demonstrated willingness of the world's most serious collectors to reach extraordinary figures for coins that combine maximum rarity with maximum condition and maximum historical significance. And the 1951 in its finest form delivers all three of those qualities simultaneously and completely. The auction history of top-tier wheat pennies from the San Francisco Mint tells a story of relentless and accelerating appreciation that shows no signs of slowing. Private sales have occurred at figures that were not disclosed publicly but that industry insiders have described in terms that make the numbers we have discussed today feel almost conservative. The collector base for coins of this caliber is global, with serious buyers in North America, Europe, Asia, and the Middle East competing for the same tiny pool of available specimens, and that international demand against a fixed and slowly shrinking supply creates the conditions for exactly the kind of valuations we are discussing. But perhaps the most powerful thing about the 1951 wheat penny, the thing that elevates it above even its extraordinary financial significance, is what it represents as a human object. Every coin is a time capsule, but the finest wheat pennies from the final years of that era carry a special weight, because they were among the last of their kind. By 1959, the wheat design would be gone forever, replaced by the Lincoln Memorial reverse that is still used in modified form today, and the people who held these 1951 pennies in their hands in the early 1950s had no way of knowing they were handling the last chapters of a 50-year numismatic story. They were just spending money. They were buying newspapers and candy bars and bus tickets and cups of coffee, and the coins passed from hand to hand, wearing down, losing their luster, disappearing into the vast anonymous river of American commerce. But somewhere, in some forgotten corner of the country, a few of them did not disappear. A few of them were set aside, by accident or by instinct or by a collector who sensed something special, and those coins survived, pristine and perfect, waiting for the world to catch up to their value. And here we are, more than 70 years later, finally understanding what those coins were worth all along. This is the grand finale of today's Hidden Coins Vault, 3 wheat pennies from 3 consecutive years, each one a masterpiece of rarity and history, each one a reminder that the most extraordinary treasures are not always locked in vaults or displayed behind glass in museums. Sometimes they are sitting in a jar on a shelf, or tucked inside an old wallet, or buried in a box of miscellaneous change that nobody has opened in 30 years. The 1946D, the 1950s, and the 1951 wheat pennies are proof that history has a way of hiding its greatest gifts in the most ordinary places, and that the difference between finding a fortune and spending it unknowingly comes down to nothing more than knowledge, attention, and the willingness to look a little more carefully at the things you already hold in your hands. So go check your old coins. Go open those jars. Go dig out those old collections. Because somewhere out there, one of these pennies is waiting, and the person who finds it is going to have a story to tell that makes everything we shared today feel like just the beginning.